Hi guys, what a fast moving month it's been as we've jumped right into our summer speech class. I hope you're well. It's been an exciting time as I've listened to first your introductory speeches and now to your informative speeches. It was quite interesting. Spent a full, probably 2 days listening to your speeches, taking notes, just kind of snuggled on my couch with my laptop in front of me, earplugs on, earplugs off, going through, taking notes, laughing, sobering up, stopping, going back and re listening to what you had to say and how you were saying it, and looking at your props and getting an idea and a feel for who you really were and how you were going to present yourselves. Um, Gave me some interesting things to think about. I'll come back to your speeches in just a few minutes. I wanted to let you know that your midterms have been opened back up. I know a lot of you had questions about answers you may have missed. I wanted to remind you that multiple choice questions often can be tricky. Um, and so I think when you look at your answers, you'll get a better idea of those things that you were correct on, and then maybe that could have been more correct on. Sorry, those aren't open right away, but in an online class, we have to wait until all the students, typically, wait until all the students are finished with taking their test, and then we go ahead and open that up for you to see your answers. I know it caused some of you some anxiety. Nothing too much to worry about, though. Let's get through this grading period, get your grades posted before you start worrying about a few points here and there. And I think you'll find that you're doing better than you probably thought you were. So let's get through that test anxiety and move on to the next stage. As far as your tribute speeches, I was looking back through the learning activities and so forth, and I thought that perhaps, and see, I'm saying perhaps the tribute speeches that are posted or not, the lack thereof, really are not that helpful. So I went ahead and posted a tribute to Tom Hanks that has a tribute from Steve Martin and a tribute from Meg Ryan. I think you'll find those extremely helpful and kind of fun to listen to. Uh, there is one part where Steve Martin is kind of blipped out appropriately so. I wish he just hadn't said it. But other than that, I think you'll find that both speeches, although they're vastly different, represent well what a good tribute speech can sound like in a contemporary tribute speech. Not that all of your speeches have to be funny. Obviously, Tom Hanks is a funny person, but I think you'll get the idea that a tribute speech can move right along and does not necessarily need to be 407 years ago, our forefathers, including Abraham Lincoln, which is kind of the example that we get in the book. I wasn't real comfortable with that example. I mean, it is a great example of a great tribute, but I think there's much more contemporary tributes that we can probably relate to. And they're not necessarily the ones that we get all over YouTube either, that are from fellow classmates and so forth, that are my mother's such a great person, and I love my mother, and she was a great person. But I think we should always aspire to more and look to the most excellent speeches as our examples, not necessarily the ones that are just as easily available. Okay, now moving on. I did want to comment on an exercise, an assignment that we had a few weeks ago. I thought it was hugely ironic that as we were discussing some N-word issues, and then some hate speech issues just more recently, that just in this past week, making national news was Marco Rubio with a story. And I'm going to go over to one of my screens here to just give me the exact words. There were two stories that came up. there was a story that one of my news writers that I work with here at a newspaper that I edit, um, the headline was actually Rubio says Christian message could be labeled hate speech. And Rubio provides a compelling argument that he gave in a talk with Christian Broadcasting News, CBN, that said that more and more um, that we are at the quote water's edge, that mainstream Christian teaching, in other words, things that you might hear in church, the Bible, has become labeled hate speech. And he said, quote, because today we've reached the point in our society where if you do not support same sex marriage, you are labeled a homophobe and a hater. Now think about that for a minute. I want you to think about that thought for a minute. If you do not support same sex marriage, you are labeled a homophobe and a hater. I think in many of your examples of hate speech, that some of those things actually came out. That the labeling of it's very easy for people on the internet to label anything they want to, anything they want to. You can label something and throw it up on YouTube and say, this is an example of hate speech. And that doesn't mean that you're actually the expert or you're credible. It could mean you are. You could be the expert. You could be credible. And it could be just your opinion. But when you're looking through a search engine, you're Googling for something, and that comes up and it's labeled hate speech, does that mean that that is your best example of hate speech? Or does that mean that that's somebody's opinion about what is hate speech? Well, I think that Rubio gets right to the point of that. The article goes on to say that in going after individuals, the next step is to argue that the teachings of mainstream Christianity, the catechism of the Catholic Church, and that's because he's Catholic and I'm looking over my computer screen, excuse me here, but is hate speech, and there's a real and present danger. I really sensed that when I read through and looked at some of your examples and looked at some of the examples myself when I went ahead and Googled hate speech and kind of saw where some of these things were coming from. I thought, wow, it really is become more and more prevalent. I think at least 6 or 7 out of the examples that I saw really were very suspect as far as examples of actual hate speech, or were they differences of opinion that to somebody might sound like hate, but to somebody else might sound like that's an expression of their Christian belief? And where does that right to their belief back right up against to somebody else's perceived right to express their sexual expression or their sexual identity, or they might even consider it their civil right. So we've got a real tenuous situation going on in our United States. But if we're not careful, as Marco Rubio says, and many others, Christians will lose their right to even be able to freely preach the Bible, to preach their own religion, to be able to follow their own conscience as it regards their own religious faith, lest they be labeled a bigot, a homophobe, a racist. Um, um, and I only say racist in the sense that really is not what I'm getting at, because there is racial talk that is hate speech. But it seems like it's all thrown into that same category when it is arbitrarily thrown into the pot with same-sex marriage and some other issues like that. Hate speech typically used to be defined more as more in terms of it's being blatantly racist. and something that was incited people to violence and so forth. But it is now being redefined, is my point. Okay, now moving on, because that kind of got elongated and out there. There was a second story that came up just today that I thought was outrageously important in this discussion. Here we were discussing the N word, and then we kind of moved on to hate speech. Um, and then today, this news that a white professor at a Pennsylvania college, a professor of religion, has written uh, this I'm not even sure what to call it, this piece called the 10 Cracka, 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 short for cracker, commandments. And he's talking about white privilege. He says he's a religion professor at Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, looking at another screen now. And he's posted this set of commandments for white people, or as he calls white people, crackas. Now, I'm a little bit familiar with that. I was a newspaper editor in Florida a few years ago, and one of our Florida Baptist associations they were going to have a cracker day. And I'm like, what in the world is a cracker day? And one of the ladies in my office said, well, some people kind of take that as a racial term, but here in Florida, it used to be like the people that rounded up cattle, and it's the cowboys and people like that. And so we think it's kind of funny, just tongue in cheek. And I'm like, I don't think that's funny. I'm from Southern California, and I've heard that term before, and I think that's just not funny to me, and I don't think it's funny to the people in Georgia, and I'm just not thinking that that's a funny term. This was maybe 2 years ago, maybe right around the Trayvon Martin time. That was 2012, I think. So I was just not thinking that that was a very cool thing to do. So I kind of changed the announcement a little bit to say that they were having a community event that was involved roping and Western stuff, whatever. I downplayed it. Anyway, I mean, I couldn't tell them what to label their own event, but I could certainly not put that in my newspaper, which could go nationwide online. And so that's what I did. Well, so here, all that to say, I was very familiar with the connotation behind the term. So here we have it, just today. And this came out a few days ago. There is this professor who thinks this is just, timely. And it's this rule of 10 commandments in basically in reaction to the All Lives Matter. His first commandment is all lives matter won't matter until Black Lives Matter. This commandment is a litmus test and the greatest commandment. Other commandments promote liberal white guilt, encouraging readers to always remember that white privilege is real even if you don't understand it. Okay, so we have a huge discussion in this country going on about black, white terms, the N word, the cracker word. And so this is important stuff. Is this appropriate? Is the same discussion, the same outrage going to ensue over being called a cracker or a cracka as being called the other word, the N word? Interesting discussions going on in our world. What a time to be a college student, and what a time to be in a speech class. Can you imagine saying those words in a way that's not in the way that I'm talking about them, in a way that we're discussing them and we're having a discussion about them in a speech class? But what a great time to be educated and armed with knowledge and taking on important information that you can share and disseminate. Now, speaking of that, your informative speeches. Wow, I learned so much. Okay, I learned that the emblem, the logo for Starbucks, for instance, came from Moby Dick, one of my favorite books in all of British literature. And that's exciting to me. Wow, I didn't know that. I learned a little bit more about the body with the stretch band things. I learned a little bit more about Portland and about Oregon, which is one of my favorite cities to visit, and Seattle, Washington, and especially why one young man is so passionate about it and wants to raise a family there and so forth. Um, wow. The speech on memory loss and the fact that it could be tied more into the fact that we see, where is it? Where is it? Okay. Can I Google it? Where is it? Where's my phone? Aha. That we often pick up a phone or we Google something instead of, looking into our memory banks. Wow, what a speech. So many of your speeches are firefighter who helped us understand that it's more than just fighting fires. And not only that, it's how you get to be a firefighter and all that it takes to do that. So many of your speeches, anything, okay, I stepped into the restroom, I did my blusher, my bronzer, maybe I didn't contour so much, and, I kind of go light on the eyes because that stuff bothers me, but, important stuff, interesting stuff. More about, breast cancer awareness, and certainly I've had a little kind of bout with that, and have had a sister and friends, but and there's just so much that we can learn just from each other. So bravo, bravo, you did a good job. You did a good job. Every one of you brought some perspectives to the forefront of the class. You taught us some things. I'm glad to have learned and benefited from your speeches. Let's keep up the good work. Let's keep learning. We have these tribute speeches next. I encourage you to do them with passion, with interest. Show some time. Get your props going, or your presentation tools, as your book puts it. Make sure you read those chapters and acquaint yourself with just exactly what the text says, and also look around for good examples. And don't, like I said, be careful when you're on YouTube and you're looking for, presentation speeches and this and that, because there's so many out there that are by other students, which is great. Look at what other students do, but also look above what other students do and aspire to do what, professionals are doing and other people are doing in industry, because that's where you want to be. Is you want to take it up, you want to notch it up. I know when I taught newspaper, I rarely put other student newspapers in front of my newspaper students. I put things like, the LA Times, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlanta Constitution and Journal, the Houston Chronicle. I put papers like that in front of my students, the Wall Street Journal. I wanted them to aspire to be the professionals that they were learning to be in their classes. So the same for you. Look at professional speeches that are done by movie stars and actors and professionals. And that way you'll learn to aspire to those sorts of speeches. And I'll put some more of those out there so that you can look at those. So if you have any questions, pop in with an email, text me. My number's on the syllabus. Give me a phone call if you're absolutely desperate, and I'll try to answer it right away. We are on a little bit of a time delay. I'm on Central Time, and you are on Pacific Time. So have a great week, and let me know if you have any questions or difficulties. Thank you. Bye-bye.